You're now watching a clip from the Inspired by show. You can watch the full episode on our YouTube channel or listen on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure to head over there, leave us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed it, and follow the show.
But because I'd never written a book before, I had absolutely no idea how to get started. And I took Amelia on holiday to Gran Canaria, and initially the intent was to have it as a working holiday. I found a week where I only had online appointments, and I thought I would just go somewhere in the sun, in the same time zone, and I'll work. And Amelia could hang around by the pool and be on holiday. But when I got there, the internet signal was so poor, I couldn't hold online clients. So I ended up having to rearrange all my appointments anyway. And I thought, well, I've got a week now. Let's just write the damn book. Let's just get started. I did cheat a little bit. I went on to ChatGPT and said, these are the things that I want to talk about. Can you create a structure for me? So it came out, and ChatGPT, the language is awful. It's horrible, isn't it? But what it did is it gave me how to structure it, the chapters, how to section out the chapters. I changed the titles to my own wording. But then once I got that in place, all I had to do was fill in the blanks. And it took me about 2 weeks. Once I had that structure in place, because all of it was up here. I'd been mentally writing it for about 2 years, and it was just, I think I used the term with you, I send you my manuscript, it's my word vomit. Fortunately, it wasn't too bad, so there wasn't too much to do with it. But it was having that structure, just know how to get started. That was the hard thing. And once I got that structure in place, it all just came flowing out. It was so much easier.
Yeah, so true. So true. When people come to us about writing a book and they'll say, how long does it take me to write the book? I'm like, the writing bit isn't the hard bit. It's the planning and the structure and the book outline, if you will. That's what we spend most of our time mentoring people on, because you've got to get that right. It's like the skeleton. Then you might change a few things as you're writing, you get inspired. But I was similar to you, wrote my first book quite fast as well, in 10 days. So I think when you have the outline, it does help. And I love your honesty about AI, because I'm always like, people come to me as a publisher, do you think I should write my book with AI? How do I use it? And I'm like, use it sparingly, use it, change the words, change the language. But once you've got the framework, the rest is history.
And I think the other thing that I need to be honest about is the stuff that I've talked about in there, they're not my models. They're models that have been around for decades, that lots and lots of trainers use, lots and lots of people have been talking about. All I've done is I've talked about them in a way that I think is easy for people to understand. And that's based on how I've trained them over the years. And then just a few stories in there to give examples on my own personal experience and how the models either would have helped or did help in there. And it's just it's a story / manuscript all at the same time. It's like a reference book. So if you've got a situation where you don't know how to deal with a situation, there's a chapter on the different styles of leadership. You go there and think, right, actually, this sounds like this would be the right one to use. So I'm going to go in there and I might want to consult rather than just leave them to it and be this transformational leader that social media talks about all the time. Actually, I'm going to be more involved because I'm trying this transformational approach, but we're not getting anywhere. So maybe I need to step in and consult people on what they think, but then actually provide the decision for them. Or you might be in a situation where you're giving too much direction and people are far too dependent on you and it's taking up far more of your time. So maybe I might try not necessarily jumping straight to transformational, because it takes a long time to be able to get there, but a more transformational style approach where you give a little bit of latitude and maybe empowering somebody to have a bit of decision-making authority. But there's certain chapters, I think, for most situations people find themselves in.
Yeah, I agree. When I read the manuscript, it was really ironic, actually, because as I said, I've never done any leadership training. I've actually trained some leaders actually in other roles, but I'd never actually found somewhere that was simple enough to go, oh, this actually just makes a lot of sense. And one of the things I find interesting, Andy, is like you said, when you came to us, you were like, I've just vomited on a page. Now, when anyone ever says that to me, I'm like, oh God, okay, like we need to brace ourselves. And Alex is our publishing manager. You've worked very closely. She's fantastic. Her and I got off the session, and this is when we talk about timeline. She said, Chloe, how long do you think we need on the timeline to edit? And I was like, I've got no idea. Andy said he's vomited on a page. Like, we're going to need to edit loads. And when I read it, I was like, I think you were very hard on yourself. I actually think it was very, very good. And there was only a few tweaks really to make. My question for you on that is, how did you know when it was the right time to finish? Like a lot of people struggle, they want to keep writing, they want to keep changing. How did you know when it was the right time?
So because I teach leadership, I've taught it for a few years now. I used to teach it in the Air Force and teach it now. I have a whole list of training objectives that are required in order for people to finish my program. So actually that made it a lot easier because what I'm writing about is what I teach. So as soon as I'd not all of them, because there's other topics such as well-being and well-being awareness and things like that needs to be a separate book in itself. In fact, there's so many out there already. But the day-to-day leading individuals, leading teams, it's just okay. What are the things that are really, really important that people need to know, or people need to consider for when they're in those situations? And then when I'd exhausted my training objectives, that told me it was time to finish it. But it's really good because I would say that, wouldn't I? Because it means that people have always got that reference to look at, but it also provided a foundation for me that when I'm reading back through it, I'm thinking, right, how can I? It gives me a point of, right, how can I build on that? How can I go into more detail? What's missing from that? What else could people find useful in certain situations? So can I break down a training objective into more enabling objectives? For example, more key learning points to think about. Are there different ways of thinking? So since I wrote my book, the amount of time I've been spending reading leadership journals, psychology papers, and things like that to see, right, what is the newer way of thinking? Actually, there's not that much new, because as human beings, we've been around for a fair old time. So most people know most of the new stuff that's out there is the old stuff using different language. Hopefully, please correct me if I am missing something, because I've just not come across that yet. So actually, it gave me a hell of a lot of confidence that I am teaching the right thing, because it did spark that curiosity within me. And it's like, actually, no, what I'm talking about is good. Not everybody's going to like it, because I've used very simple language, very simple writing. So other people prefer the more academic style. That's absolutely fine. There are going to be a lot of people like me, like a lot of other people who are going to like the simplicity and the easy way to understand it.
Yeah, so true though. And it's also one of the reasons why we all say your book isn't for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, when we talked about the title, it was a bit of a discussion. It was like, is this going to piss people off? Is this going to attract the right people? Yeah. I think it's fair to say that the book's always supposed to attract certain people. Like my title of my book, Just Write the Damn Book. Yeah. You know my personality as soon as you hear that. Same with your book title. And you kind of want your book to attract people, but also completely alienate the people that are not the right people. How has it gone down with your book title?
So the vast majority of people absolutely love it, which is fantastic. I knew, because the people that I associate with, the people that I'm friends with, obviously there's a reason why we're friends and why we get on. Best of my memory, there are 2 people that didn't like it, and they were both HR professionals. And I think they were coming from an inappropriate language bias. And it is a bias, because actually, in my experience, when we try and decide or judge what is appropriate or inappropriate on behalf of other people, more often than not, we get it wrong. So a great example of that is when I was teaching leadership in the Air Force. Policy-wise, we had to be very, very careful about the language that we used in the classroom, because everybody's got their own different opinions on the use of language and what's good, what's bad. But out of all the courses that I taught over the few years that I was there was only one course that there was one person in there that just didn't like any kind of bad language. So we agreed that we wouldn't use bad language. There were the occasional people who didn't like the F word, far more people who didn't like the C word. So we'd come up with a contract and agreement. We won't use those specific words, but everything else is just normal language. But what I found overwhelmingly was that swearing is a fantastic way of showing passion, of showing emotion, showing urgency. When it's your I mean, I worked in building firms before I joined up, and there were people there that used the F word as a comma. So I'm not necessarily talking that, but when it's familiar, actually it helps us become more comfortable with the person, because it's just everyday language. And when we can use it to show passion and urgency and emotion, actually it helps the other person understand how important this is, and it can really help build trust, break down barriers, help people prioritize what's important.